In the vastness of space, where the extraordinary becomes routine and the impossible is just Tuesday, there lived a completely ordinary human named Max Underhill. Max was the kind of person who could blend into the background of any space station corridor medium height, unremarkable features, and the particular slouch of someone who had spent too many years fixing things that other people broke. As the lead maintenance technician on Odyssey VII, the most diverse and allegedly advanced human-alien cooperative space station this side of the Orion Arm, Max had seen pretty much everything the universe could throw at him. Maintenance request number 4291, fix the atmospheric regulator in the Zentorian diplomatic suite. Again. Max sighed, reading from his work tablet. Note: Ambassador complains of excess nitrogen causing their secondary breathing sacs to inflate inappropriately during formal meetings. Max trudged through the gleaming corridors of Odyssey VII, nodding politely to the parade of interstellar oddities that called the station home. A group of Melosians floated by, their translucent bell-shaped bodies pulsing with bioluminescent light. They were arguing about stock prices in a series of melodic whistles that made Max's fillings vibrate. In the central atrium, a craft merchant with 6 arms was simultaneously haggling with customers, restocking shelves, and picking pockets. Business as usual. "Good morning, Max," chirped Lumi, a cheerful Arcturian whose blue-tinged skin glittered under the artificial sunlight. "How's your little contraband doing today?" Max shot her a warning look and glanced around nervously. "I have no idea what you're talking about," he whispered, "but hypothetically, if I did have something that rhymed with hat in my quarters against station regulations, so it would be doing just fine, thanks." The hat in question was actually Pixel, a sleek black cat with 1 white paw and an attitude problem. Pets were strictly forbidden on Odyssey VI, especially earth mammals, which had a nasty habit of causing allergic reactions in at least 7 different species and religious offense to at least 3 others. But Max had smuggled Pixel aboard 6 months ago after finding her as a kitten in a shipping container of Earth luxury goods. He'd been a goner the moment she looked at him with those wide green eyes. Max had just finished repairing the Zentorian's atmospheric regulator. The problem was less about nitrogen and more about the ambassador's fondness for fermented plutonian slug wine when his tablet pinged with an alert. Quarterly inspection. Today. In 15 minutes. "Oh crap," Max muttered, sprinting toward the residence sector. He had to get back to his quarters before Inspector Greel arrived. Greel was a by-the-book Taurian with 4 eyes and 0 sense of humor, especially about unauthorized Earth fauna. Max burst into his tiny quarters, breathless and panicked. "Pixel." "Hide time." Silence greeted him. No indignant meow. No black blur rushing to the designated hiding spot inside the hollowed-out environmental control panel. "Pixel? Come on, this isn't funny." Max tore apart his quarters, not that there was much to tear apart in the 200-square-foot module, but no cat appeared. He was on his hands and knees looking under his bed when the door chimed. Maintenance technician Underhill. Quarterly inspection. "Open your door immediately." Greel's gravelly voice sounded even less pleasant through the intercom. Max scrambled to his feet, took a deep breath, and plastered on his most innocent expression. "Inspector Greel." What a pleasant surprise. The inspection was going about as well as could be expected, Greel noting minor infractions like Max's unauthorized Star Trek poster and the slight modification he'd made to the air filtration system to handle cat hair when the station-wide alert system suddenly blared to life. "Attention all personnel. Class 5 plasma storm approaching. This is not a drill. Emergency protocols now in effect. Proceed to designated shelter areas immediately. Estimated time to impact, 45 minutes. Greel's 4 eyes widened in alarm. Inspection terminated. Proceed to shelter immediately. Technician Underhill. And with that, the inspector was gone, already barking orders into his comm unit as he rushed down the corridor. Max stood frozen in his doorway. A Class 5 plasma storm was no joke. It could fry the station's external systems, create hull breaches, and generally ruin everyone's day. And somewhere out there, Pixel was wandering around completely unaware of the danger. "Pixel," Max whispered to the empty corridor. "Where the hell are you?" The evacuation klaxons wailed through Odyssey V like the universe's most annoying alarm clock. Crew members and aliens of all descriptions rushed through the corridors, following the emergency illumination strips toward their designated shelter zones. Through the mounting chaos, Max pushed against the flow, scanning every corner and crevice for a glimpse of black fur. Pixel, he called, ignoring the strange looks from passing aliens. Here, Kitty, Kitty. Kitty, Underhill. A commanding voice cut through the din. Why aren't you heading to your shelter? Max turned to find himself face to chest with Commander Vrex, the station's head of security. Vrex was an imposing Rigelian, standing 7 feet tall with iridescent scaled skin and a permanent scowl that suggested constipation was a cross-species affliction. The commander. I was just checking the maintenance ducts. You know how those plasma storms can back up the ventilation systems? Max attempted his most professional smile. Rex's reptilian eyes narrowed. Our maintenance protocols during emergency situations are quite clear, technician. All non-essential personnel must proceed to designated shelters while essential systems are secured by authorized emergency teams. And you. You. He leaned down until his face was inches from Max's, are not on any emergency team. Right you are, Commander. Just being thorough. Heading to my shelter now. Max saluted awkwardly and sidled away. As soon as Vrex turned his attention to a group of panicking Melosians, Max ducked into a maintenance alcove and pulled out his tablet. If he couldn't physically search the entire station in the remaining he checked the emergency countdown minus 38 minutes, he'd have to be smarter about it. Max hacked into the station's security feed, a trick he'd learned from Dex, his engineering friend with a questionable relationship with regulations. He set the system to scan for small, cat-sized moving objects that weren't registered personnel. Come on, Pixel. Where are you? He muttered, watching the feeds flicker by at high speed. After an agonizing 3 minutes, the system pinged. There, padding curiously along the transparent floor of the external observation deck, was a small black figure with one white paw. You have got to be kidding me, Max groaned. The external observation deck was a bubble of transparent aluminum extending from the station's hull, offering spectacular views of space. It was also the absolute worst place to be during a plasma storm, completely exposed, minimally shielded, and scheduled to be sealed off in less than 30 minutes. Max made a decision that any rational human being would classify somewhere between profoundly stupid and suicidally idiotic. He was going after Pixel. As he rushed toward the nearest transport tube, his tablet pinged with another alert. All personnel now have 30 minutes to reach shelters. External sections will be sealed in 15 minutes. The tube deposited Max at the entrance to Deck 7, still 2 levels away from the observation deck. As he sprinted through the increasingly empty corridors, the station's AI helpfully informed everyone that the plasma storm had accelerated and would now reach them in 35 minutes. Fantastic, Max panted, reaching the sealed doors to the external observation deck. Through the small window, he could see Pixel, who had apparently decided that the impending cosmic disaster was the perfect time for a nap on one of the viewing couches. The door's access panel flashed red, areas sealed for emergency protocols. Max stared at his cat, lounging peacefully beyond the sealed door, and at the emergency countdown on his tablet. Then he did what any reasonable, professional, responsible adult would do. He decided to break every station protocol to rescue his illegal pet from a lethal plasma storm. You want to do what? Dex's normally blue face had turned a concerning shade of purple. Dex Viridian was Odyssey V's most talented engineer and, more importantly at this moment, Max's best friend. They'd met 3 years ago when Max had caught Dex using the station's quantum processors to mine cryptocurrency. Instead of reporting him, Max had asked for a cut. I need to get to the external observation deck before it's sealed off, Max repeated, glancing nervously at his tablet. 12 minutes until the deck would be completely locked down. During a Class 5 plasma storm, Dex's antennae twitched in disbelief. Yes. To rescue your unauthorized cat. Also yes. The cat you're not supposed to have. That's the one. Dex slumped against his workbench in the engineering lab. Have you considered just getting a new cat? One that doesn't require you to commit suicide by plasma? Max fixed him with a determined stare. Pixel is family. Dex sighed the deep, existential sigh of someone who knew they were about to do something incredibly stupid for friendship. Fine, but you'll need protection. A Class 5 storm will fry you like a Venusian breakfast skillet in nanoseconds. Max watched as Dex rummaged through storage lockers, pulling out an assortment of equipment. We can modify a maintenance exosuit with extra shielding. It won't hold up for long, but it might give you enough time to grab your furry death wish and get back. Together, they cobbled together what had to be the most questionable safety equipment in the history of space exploration. A standard maintenance exosuit reinforced with kitchen insulation material, coolant tubes from a decommissioned food replicator, and reflective emergency blankets. This looks like something a child would make for a science project, Max observed, examining the patchwork contraption. A child with a death wish, maybe, Dex muttered. Attaching the final piece, a makeshift helmet crafted from a spare atmosphere regulators and what appeared to be parts of a shower stall. This might, and I stress might, protect you for about 5 minutes in the storm's outer bands. The intensity increases exponentially as you get closer to the center, so don't dawdle. Max was halfway into the suit when the lab doors whooshed open and Commander Vrex stormed in, flanked by 2 security officers. Engineer Viridian, why are you not at your emergency station? Vrex demanded. Then his eyes fell on Max and the jury-rigged exosuit. What in the 7 moons of Regal is this? Would you believe emergency fashion show? Max attempted. Vrex's expression suggested he would not. Maintenance technician Underhill. Our sensors detected unauthorized access to security feeds from your tablet. Upon investigation, we discovered you were tracking an unregistered lifeform on the external observation deck. Vrex's eyes narrowed to slits. A Earth feline, perhaps? Commander, Max started. I can explain. Detain him, Vrex ordered his officers. We'll deal with this regulation breach after the emergency has passed. As the officers moved forward, Dex suddenly shouted, look, a critical systems failure. When everyone turned, he slammed his hand on a large red button labeled emergency test only. The lab was instantly filled with dense, harmless, but thoroughly disorienting fog. Go, Dex yelled. I'll hold them off. Max didn't need to be told twice. Yanking on the helmet, he bolted through the fog and out the lab door. Behind him, he could hear Vrex's distinctive roar of frustration and Dex's theatrical cries of, oh no, how did this happen? So unfortunate. Max sprinted through the corridors, the unwieldy suit clanking and rattling with every step. The station was eerily empty now, most personnel safely in their shelters. His tablet showed 8 minutes until complete lockdown of the external sections. He skidded around a corner and nearly collided with a security barrier that hadn't been there before. Emergency protocols engaged, the station AI announced pleasantly. All routes to external sections now restricted. Oh, come on. Max groaned, then spotted a maintenance access panel nearby. Without hesitation, he pried it open and squeezed his bulky suit into the narrow crawl space beyond. The maintenance tunnels were a cramped, dusty labyrinth that ran throughout the station like arteries. Max had spent enough time in them to navigate by instinct, even in the dim emergency lighting. He crawled, scuttled, and occasionally cursed his way through the network, emerging finally through a panel just meters from the observation deck's emergency airlock. His tablet pinged. 3 minutes to lockdown, 30 minutes to storm impact. The airlock controls were, predictably, locked, but Max hadn't spent years fixing the station's systems without learning a thing or two about bypassing security. With practiced fingers, he popped open the control panel and rewired the emergency override. As the airlock door slid open, Max's makeshift helmet display lit up with warnings. The outer bands of the plasma storm were already licking at the station's shields, sending ripples of purple-blue energy dancing across the external hull. Hang on, Pixel, Max muttered, stepping into the airlock. Daddy's coming. Max had always thought that walking into hell was just a colorful metaphor. As the external airlock door slid open onto the observation deck, he discovered it was more like an understatement. The normally breathtaking panorama of stars had vanished, replaced by a churning maelstrom of violet and electric blue energy. Lightning-like tendrils of plasma lashed against the transparent aluminum dome, each strike sending spiderweb cracks racing across its surface before the self-healing properties kicked in. The entire deck vibrated with the storm's fury, making the floor beneath Max's feet feel like the universe's most terrifying trampoline. And his brilliant protective suit. It lasted approximately 7 seconds. First, the kitchen insulation material melted like ice cream on a hot sidewalk. Then the coolant tubes ruptured, spraying Max with a substance that would have been refreshingly cool if it weren't for the fact that his outer layer was simultaneously catching fire. The makeshift helmet's display fizzled out with a sad little electronic death rattle, leaving Max essentially wearing garbage that was now actively combusting. "Perfect," Max muttered, frantically slapping at the smoldering patches on his sleeves. "Just perfect." Bah. Squinting through the increasingly useless helmet visor, Max spotted Pixel, still lounging on that same viewing couch about 30 meters away, watching the apocalyptic light show with casual feline interest. Max staggered forward, the deck's surface growing hotter beneath his boots with each step. The air crackled with energy that made his hair stand on end and his skin tingle painfully even through what remained of the suit. 15 meters in, disaster struck again. Max's left boot made contact with a particularly energetic plasma discharge that had somehow slipped through the viewing dome's shields. There was a flash, a sizzling noise that reminded him uncomfortably of bacon frying, and suddenly he was missing a boot along with the sock and possibly a layer of skin beneath it. Son of a Max bit down on the expletive as pain seared up his leg. Looking down in horror, he saw his foot was an angry red but miraculously still attached and mostly uncharred. The plasma had apparently vaporized his footwear without taking the foot with its small mercies. Before he could process this development, his right boot followed suit, disappearing in another flash of superheated plasma. Now completely barefoot, Max found himself in the uniquely awful position of having to cross 15 more meters of increasingly hot deck plating with nothing between his feet and the metal except rapidly diminishing courage. This was not in the job description. Max hissed through gritted teeth, taking another excruciating step forward. Each footfall felt like stepping on hot coals, if hot coals were also electrified and possibly radioactive. The suit continued to disintegrate around him, first the sleeves, then the chest piece, until Max was essentially hobbling across the deck in his underwear and the sad remains of his helmet. The plasma storm intensified outside, battering the dome with increasing fury. Max could hear the station's AI announcing something over the communication system, but the words were lost in the storm's deafening roar. 10 more meters. 7. 5. Max's vision blurred with pain, but he kept his eyes fixed on Pixel, who had finally deigned to notice his approach. The cat sat up, stretched languidly, and watched his agonizing progress with what Max swore was amusement. "When we get out of this," Max gasped, "you're eating budget cat food for a year." 3 meters. 2. 1. With a final, heroic lunge, Max collapsed onto the viewing couch beside Pixel. Only then did he notice something odd. The pain in his feet had suddenly diminished, and the violent buffeting of the storm seemed muted. Looking around in confusion, Max realized that a small bubble of calm surrounded the couch where Pixel sat, as if the storm itself was being held at bay. "What the—" Max breathed, staring at his cat in disbelief. Pixel looked back at him with those intelligent green eyes, blinked slowly, and meowed once, a sound that somehow cut through the storm's chaos with perfect clarity. Max stared at Pixel, who sat calmly washing her paw as if they weren't in the middle of an interstellar catastrophe. Around them, a perfectly spherical zone of tranquility extended about 2 meters in every direction, while outside their bubble, the plasma storm raged with increasing violence. "You're not just a cat, are you?" Max asked, his voice barely audible over the storm's fury. Pixel stopped grooming and fixed him with a stare that suddenly seemed far too intelligent for a common house cat. Then she stretched, her body elongating unnaturally, the black fur rippling like liquid shadow. A soft glow emanated from her eyes, spreading until her entire body shimmered with the same energy that churned outside their protected bubble. "Holy crap," Max breathed. The cat, or whatever Pixel actually was, stood and padded to the edge of their safe zone. When she reached the boundary, she pressed one white paw against the invisible barrier. The protective bubble expanded slightly, responding to her touch. Max's survival instincts finally kicked back in. "Can you get us out of here? Because I'm pretty sure this deck is about to disintegrate, and I've already lost my boots to this storm. I'm kind of attached to my remaining body parts." As if understanding, Pixel turned and meowed again, this time with a distinct tone of command. The bubble around them expanded further, enveloping the entire couch. Then, to Max's astonishment, the couch began to slide across the deck toward the airlock, propelled by some unseen force within their protective field. Meanwhile, back in the station's emergency command center, chaos reigned. Commander Vrex stood rigid with shock, all four eyes fixed on the security feed showing the external observation deck. "Is that Underhill?" he demanded, pointing a scaled finger at the mostly naked human huddled on a moving couch beside what appeared to be a glowing cat. "And what in the seven hells is that creature?" "Unknown, Commander," replied Lieutenant Kodo, frantically scanning sensor readings. "But whatever it is, it's generating a localized counter-resonance field that's neutralizing the plasma energy." "Impossible," Vrex muttered. "No known technology can shield against a Class 5 storm at such close proximity." "It's not technology, sir," Lieutenant Kodo replied, her voice hushed with awe. "It's biological." On another screen, the storm's fury was visibly increasing. The protective shields around Odyssey VII were beginning to fail under the onslaught, critical systems flashing red across the monitoring displays. The hull breach on Deck 12 called out a technician, the automated seals engaged but holding at only 60% integrity. Vrex tore his gaze from the miracle on the observation deck. Direct emergency power to the shields around the habitation sectors, sacrifice the research wings if necessary. "Sir," Kodo interjected, pointing urgently at the screen showing Max and Pixel. "Look." The glowing cat creature had stopped their couch near the airlock. As they watched, the bubble of energy surrounding cat and human pulsed, then expanded dramatically not just across the deck, but outward through the transparent dome. The protective field spread like ripples in a pond, intercepting and neutralizing the plasma energy wherever it touched. "It's helping us," Vrex said incredulously. Back on the observation deck, Max watched in amazement as Pixel's energy field expanded beyond their immediate surroundings. The cat had grown slightly in size, her form less distinctly feline now and more like a cat-shaped constellation of living energy. "You're saving the station," Max whispered. "But why? How?" Pixel didn't respond except to intensify her efforts, the protective field pushing farther into the storm. Max noticed with concern that maintaining the expanded shield seemed to be taking a toll on her. The glow surrounding her body flickered slightly, and he could sense a tremor running through her form. Without thinking, Max reached out and placed his hand on what was still, more or less, a cat's back. "Hey, don't hurt yourself. You've done enough." At his touch, something extraordinary happened. Energy surged between them, not painful like the plasma storm, but warm and oddly familiar. Max felt strength flowing from him into Pixel, and suddenly the protective field stabilized, gleaming with renewed power. "We're connected," Max realized, understanding dawning. "You needed a human to reach your full potential." Pixel's eyes met his, and in that moment, Max knew with absolute certainty that this creature had chosen him specifically. It had allowed herself to be found in that shipping container for a purpose that went far beyond companionship. The airlock door slid open behind them, revealing a squad of security officers led by a visibly conflicted Commander Vrex. "Underhill," the commander said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "I believe you and your companion have some explaining to do." "So let me get this straight," Commander Vrex said, pacing the length of the conference room where Max sat wrapped in an emergency thermal blanket. Beside him, Pixel had returned to her ordinary cat appearance, though Max couldn't unsee the cosmic entity he now knew lurked beneath the furry exterior. Your pet is actually a Philidian energy symbiote, an ancient species that has been secretly coexisting with humans for thousands of years. That's what the xenobiologists tell me, Max replied, scratching Pixel behind the ears. The cat purred contentedly, as if she hadn't just revealed herself to be a semi-divine cosmic entity capable of manipulating fundamental energy fields. Apparently they'd been mentioned in Earth legends for centuries. The Egyptians had it right all along. Cats really are gods. Or at least, some of them are. The storm had passed, leaving Odyssey V battered but intact. Thanks to Pixel's intervention, the damage had been limited to non-essential external systems and a few easily repairable hull sections. No lives had been lost, a miracle by any standard when dealing with a Class 5 plasma storm. And you had no idea? Rex's tone suggested he found this difficult to believe. Max shrugged. She was a very convincing cat, slept 18 hours a day, knocked things off my shelves, refused to acknowledge my existence except at feeding time. The classic cat behavior. Dr. Ixora, the station's lead xenobiologist, cleared her throat. The Altarian scientist had been practically vibrating with excitement since getting her hands on the sensor readings of Pixel's transformation. According to my analysis, Commander, the Philidian chose Max specifically. Their species requires a compatible biological partner to anchor their energy forms in our dimension. The symbiotic relationship benefits both parties. The human provides stability, and the Philidian offers protection. Protection, Rex repeated flatly. Like stopping a plasma storm that would have destroyed half our station. Exactly. Dr. Ixora beamed. And that's just the beginning of what they can do. Historical records I've been able to access suggest that Philidians have been quietly protecting humanity from cosmic threats for millennia. They're essentially guardians who disguise themselves as house pets. Max looked down at Pixel with newfound respect. So all those times I found you sleeping in my dirty laundry. Still just regular cat behavior, Dr. Ixora laughed. They may be advanced cosmic entities, but they've adapted to their cover identities quite thoroughly. The conference room doors slid open, and Station Director Omin entered. The gaunt, severe administrator had a reputation for prioritizing rules and protocols above all else. Max braced himself for a reprimand or worse, for Pixel to be taken away for research purposes. Technician Underhill, Director Omin began, his voice as dry as Martian dust. It seems I owe you an apology. Max blinked. Excuse me? Our security feeds show conclusively that without your actions, however unauthorized, and the intervention of your companion, Odyssey VII would have suffered catastrophic damage. The loss of life would have been significant. Rex shifted uncomfortably. Director, there's still the matter of the unauthorized pet. Which brings me to my next point. Omin continued smoothly. Effective immediately. I am implementing a new station policy regarding Philidian energy symbiotes. They are to be classified as diplomatic guests rather than pets, with all appropriate rights and accommodations. Max couldn't help himself. Does this mean Pixel gets her own quarters? It means, Omin said with the faintest hint of a smile, that Pixel is welcome to continue sharing your quarters, so provided you both agree to assist with future research into Philidian abilities on a strictly voluntary basis, of course. After the meeting concluded, Max and Pixel made their way back to their quarters. The station buzzed with the news of what had happened. Crew members and aliens alike stopped to stare or offer awkward thanks as they passed. You're a celebrity now, Max told Pixel as they entered their room. How does it feel? Pixel jumped onto the bed, turned around 3 times, and settled down for a nap. Right, Max laughed. Business as usual. He sat down beside the cat, still trying to process everything that had happened. You know, you could have revealed yourself at any time. Why wait until I was halfway barbecued by a plasma storm? Pixel opened one eye and stared at him meaningfully. What? Max asked. You trying to tell me something? Then, for the first time, Max heard a voice in his mind, feminine, ancient, and distinctly amused. Because, Max Underhill, the voice said, Humans are at their best when they're being ridiculously heroic for someone they love. It's why we chose your species in the first place." Max gaped at the cat, who had already closed her eye again, radiating the supreme self-satisfaction that only a cat or an ancient cosmic entity disguised as one could achieve. "Wait," Max sputtered. "You can talk. And you put me through all that on purpose?" Pixel's only response was a soft, rumbling purr that somehow managed to convey both affection and the kind of smugness that comes from knowing you've been right all along. Max shook his head and laid back on the bed beside his not-just-a-cat companion. "Next time the station's in mortal danger," he muttered. "Maybe we could try communicating before I lose my footwear, okay?" "No promises," came the sleepy reply in his mind, "but I'll consider it. By the way, I expect premium treats after this. I did save everyone." As Max drifted off to sleep beside the galaxy's most extraordinary ordinary cat, he couldn't help but wonder how many other pets across the universe were actually ancient guardians in disguise. One thing was certain: he'd never look at a napping cat the same way again.